Welcome, dear friends, to a story about love, loss, and the power of chance encounters. Enjoy the story. Sarah Jenkins gripped the steering wheel of her SUV, navigating the busy streets of suburban Chicago. At 38, she was the picture of a successful working mom. Designer sunglasses perched on her nose, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. But beneath the polished exterior lay a woman with a past shrouded in mystery. The car's Bluetooth system chimed, and Sarah smiled as she saw the caller ID. "Hey, handsome," she answered, her voice warm. "There's my girl." Tom's deep voice filled the car. "Just checking in. How's the drive?" Sarah chuckled. "Same as always. You know, honey, one of these days I'm going to accuse you of having separation anxiety." "Can you blame me?" Tom's laughter echoed through the speakers. "I married the most beautiful woman in Chicago. I get nervous when she's out of my sight." "Flatterer," Sarah teased. "I'm just picking up Ethan from school. We'll be home before you know it." All right, all right. Drive safe, babe. Love you." "Love you too, Tom." As the call ended, Sarah's smile faded. She loved her life. Her doting husband, their son Ethan, their beautiful home. But there was always something nagging at the back of her mind, a void where her childhood memories should be. Pulling into the school parking lot, Sarah parked and leaned back in her seat. Her mind drifted, as it often did in quiet moments, to the first memory she had. The hospital room was stark white, the fluorescent lights harsh against her sensitive eyes. Sarah, though she didn't know that was her name yet, blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of her surroundings. Machines beeped steadily beside her, and the smell of antiseptic filled her nostrils. "She's awake!" a nurse called out, and suddenly the room was a flurry of activity. A kind-faced doctor leaned over her. "Hello there. Can you tell me your name?" Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Panic rose in her chest as she realized she didn't know the answer. She didn't know anything. "It's all right," the doctor soothed. "You've been in an accident. Some confusion is normal. Can you remember anything at all?" Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she shook her head. The nurse placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Don't worry, dear," she said softly. "We'll figure this out together." But they never did. Days turned into weeks, and still, Sarah's past remained a blank slate. With no family coming forward to claim her, she was eventually placed in the care of St. Mary's Orphanage. The orphanage was a gloomy place, all faded wallpaper and creaky floorboards. Sarah stood in front of a cracked mirror, tracing the angry red scars that marred the left side of her face. The other kids whispered and stared, calling her Frankenstein behind her back. "Freak!" a boy shouted as he passed her in the hallway. Sarah flinched but didn't respond. She'd learned that engaging only made things worse. Instead, she retreated to her favorite hiding spot, a window seat in the library, hidden behind heavy velvet curtains. There, surrounded by the musty smell of old books, she found solace. "If I can't remember who I was," she whispered to herself, "I'll just have to decide who I want to be." From that day forward, Sarah threw herself into her studies with a fierce determination. She may not have had a past, but she was determined to create a future for herself. Years passed, and Sarah grew into a quiet, studious teenager. On a crisp autumn night, she snuck out of the orphanage, desperate for a breath of fresh air and a moment of peace. The local park was deserted, save for a lone figure slouched on a bench. As Sarah approached, she realized it was a young man, probably a few years older than her. He looked up, his eyes glassy from too much alcohol. "Well, hello there, beautiful," he slurred, patting the bench beside him. "Care to join a lonely soul?" Sarah hesitated. She wasn't used to people being friendly, let alone flirtatious. In the darkness, with her scars hidden, she felt a glimmer of normalcy. "I'm Tom," the young man said, his words still slightly jumbled. "And who might you be, mystery girl?" "Sarah," she replied softly, surprising herself by sitting down. "Though sometimes I'm not sure that's really my name." Tom's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Now that's an intriguing statement. Care to elaborate?" And so, under the cover of night, Sarah found herself pouring out her story to this beautiful stranger. Tom listened intently, his initial drunkenness seeming to fade with each word. "Sarah," he said when she finished, his voice filled with awe, You're the bravest person I've ever met." In that moment, something shifted in the universe. Two lost souls found each other, and nothing would ever be the same. Sarah blinked, coming back to the present. She glanced at her phone, realizing she'd been lost in memories for nearly 20 minutes. As she was about to call Tom back, movement caught her eye. Ethan was walking out of the school, deep in conversation with a pretty red-headed girl. Sarah watched, a small smile playing on her lips. At 15, Ethan was the spitting image of his father, all tousled dark hair and charming grin. The girl laughed at something he said, playfully shoving his shoulder. As they approached the car, Sarah opened her door, ready to greet them. But suddenly, the world tilted on its axis. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and Sarah gripped the doorframe to steady herself. "Mom?" Ethan's voice sounded far away. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Her vision blurred, and she felt herself falling. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Ethan's panicked shout. "Dad, it's Mom! Something's wrong!" Tom Jenkins burst into the school parking lot, his heart pounding. He spotted the small crowd gathered around his wife's car and pushed through, muttering hurried apologies. "Sarah!" he called out, dropping to his knees beside her. She was conscious now, but clearly disoriented. "Baby, what happened?" Sarah looked up at him, her blue eyes wide with confusion. "Tom, I don't know. Everything just went black for a moment." Ethan hovered nearby, his face pale with worry. The red-headed girl stood beside him, her hand on his arm in a comforting gesture. "Should we call an ambulance?" someone in the crowd asked. Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No, no ambulance. I'm fine, really. Just got a little dizzy." Tom helped her to her feet, his arm firmly around her waist. "Are you sure, honey? Maybe we should get you checked out." "I'm okay," Sarah insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. I think I remembered something. From before." Tom's eyes widened. In nearly 20 years together, Sarah had never recovered a single memory from her life before the accident. "What did you remember?" Sarah turned to the red-headed girl. "It was a song. You were humming it as you walked up with Ethan. Can you sing it again?" The girl looked startled, but nodded. In a clear, sweet voice, she began to sing. "Hush now, my darling. Be still now. Don't cry. Sleep as you're rocked by the stream. Sleep and remember my last lullaby, so I'll be with you when you dream." As the last notes faded away, Sarah gasped. Tears filled her eyes as fragmented images flashed through her mind. A woman with kind eyes singing to her. The smell of lavender, the feeling of being safe and loved. "I know that song," she whispered. My mother used to sing it to me." The girl's father, who had arrived during the commotion, stepped forward. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and piercing green eyes. As he looked at Sarah, a flicker of recognition passed over his face. "Angela," he said hesitantly, Is that you?" Sarah stared at him, her heart racing. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The man's eyes filled with tears. "My God, it is you. Angela, I'm your brother, Alex. We've been looking for you for so long." The world seemed to stand still as Sarah processed this information. Tom's arm tightened around her, while Ethan looked on in shock. "I think," Tom said slowly, "we all need to sit down and talk." The local coffee shop was nearly empty, the late afternoon lull settling over the cozy space. Sarah sat in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of chamomile tea. Tom sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Across from them, Alex leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Ethan and Katie, the red-headed girl, sat at a nearby table, pretending not to eavesdrop while they shared a plate of fries. "I can't believe it's really you," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. We thought you were dead." Sarah took a shaky breath. "I don't understand. What happened to me? Why can't I remember anything?" Alex ran a hand through his hair, collecting his thoughts. "It was 25 years ago. You were 13, I was 17. Our family, we come from old money, old secrets. There were people who wanted to hurt us, to get to our parents." Tom leaned forward, his protective instincts kicking in. "What kind of people?" "The dangerous kind," Alex said grimly. One night they came for us. They set fire to our summer house while we were sleeping. I managed to get out, but you were trapped inside. Sarah's hand flew to her face, unconsciously tracing the faint scars that remained. The fire, she whispered. That's how I got these. Alex nodded. By the time the firefighters got you out, you were barely breathing. The doctors, they didn't think you'd make it. But you always were a fighter, Angie. Angela, Sarah said, testing out the name. That's my real name? Angela Marie Hawthorne, Alex confirmed. Named after our grandmother. Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed. But how did I end up in Chicago? Why didn't anyone find me? Alex's face twisted with guilt. We tried. God, we tried. But whoever took you from the hospital covered their tracks well. We searched for years, hired private investigators. Eventually, we had to accept that you were gone. Tom's jaw clenched. So someone deliberately hid her? Why? To protect her, I think, Alex said. The people who came after us, they were powerful, dangerous. Whoever took Angela must have thought she'd be safer with a new identity, far away from our family. Sarah's mind was reeling. And our parents? Are they? They're alive, Alex said quickly. They never really recovered from losing you. A heavy silence fell over the table. Sarah felt Tom's hand squeeze hers under the table, grounding her. What happens now? She asked softly. Alex leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. Now? Now we get to be a family again. If that's what you want. Sarah looked at Tom, seeing nothing but love and support in his eyes. She glanced over at Ethan, who gave her an encouraging nod. I think, she said slowly, I'd like that very much. The drive to the Hawthorne estate was tense with anticipation. Sarah sat in the passenger seat of Tom's car, her fingers nervously tapping against her thigh. In the back seat, Ethan and Katie whispered excitedly, while Alex followed in his own vehicle. As they pulled up to the wrought iron gates, Sarah gasped. The house beyond was a masterpiece of Victorian architecture, all soaring turrets and intricate stonework. Home sweet home, Alex said as he walked up, punching in a code to open the gates. Are you ready for this, Angie? Sarah nodded, though her heart was racing. As I'll ever be. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing an elegant woman in her early 60s. Her silver hair was swept into a chignon, and her eyes, the same shade of blue as Sarah's, were brimming with tears. Angela, she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. My baby girl. For a moment Sarah stood frozen, overwhelmed by the surge of emotion. Then, as if a dam had broken, she rushed forward into her mother's arms. Mom, she sobbed, the word feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. Mom, I'm home. Elizabeth Hawthorne held her daughter tightly, years of grief and longing pouring out in heaving sobs. I never gave up hope, she murmured into Sarah's hair. I always knew, somehow, that you were out there. The reunion was a blur of tears and laughter. Sarah's father, Richard, arrived home from a business trip, his normally stoic demeanor crumbling at the sight of his long-lost daughter. Alex's wife and children joined the gathering, and soon the grand house was filled with the joyous sounds of a family made whole again. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself on the terrace, gazing out at the meticulously manicured gardens. Tom joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. How are you holding up? He asked softly. Sarah leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. It's overwhelming, she admitted. Part of me feels like I'm dreaming. Any minute now, I'll wake up and be that scared, scarred girl in the orphanage again. Tom pressed a kiss to her temple. This is real, Sarah, or should I say Angela? There was a teasing lilt to his voice. Sarah turned in his arms, looking up at him. I don't know who I am anymore, Tom. Sarah Jenkins or Angela Hawthorne. I'm not sure I know how to be either of them. Hey, Tom said, cupping her face in his hands. You're you. Sarah, Angela, those are just names. The woman I fell in love with. The amazing mother to our son. The strongest person I know. That's who you are. Nothing can change that. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. What did I ever do to deserve you? Tom grinned. Well, you did take pity on a drunk idiot in the park all those years ago. I'd say that earns you some good karma. Sarah laughed, the sound pure and joyous. From inside, they could hear the sounds of their new extended family. Ethan's laughter mingling with the excited chatter of his new cousins, the deeper tones of Richard and Alex discussing business, Elizabeth's warm voice directing the staff to prepare more refreshments. So, Tom said, what do you want to do now? We can stay, get to know your family, or we can go home. Take some time to process all this. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in her life like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Let's stay, she said. I have 25 years of memories to make up for. As they turned to go back inside, Sarah paused. Tom, thank you. For everything. For loving me when I didn't even know who I was. Tom pulled her close, kissing her softly. Always, my love. Always. And so, surrounded by the warmth of newfound family and the steadfast love that had sustained her for so long, Sarah, Angela, took her first steps into a future brighter than she had ever dared to dream.